Let's move on to our next topic. Now, as you know, TVNZ finding it hard to make money. The merger, the last government plan between TVNZ and RNZ was put on hold. There is currently also, before the government, an absolutely mad Willie Jackson plan to tax global internet companies so that fundamentally they can subsidise the operations of New Zealand media companies. For what reason, no one can really explain to me. But in the midst of all this yesterday, and largely because it had been told off and lost a case against the E2 union, TVNZ went through the charade of consulting with its employees about $30 million worth of cuts, which are proposed, which means they will. This is just telling the staff before the axe falls. They're going to get rid of their app and my understanding is their online news site to concentrate on their streaming service, and they're going to outsource some backroom functions in an effort to save $30 million. But is this all really just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? Have state-owned or operated broadcasters and media companies failed to grasp just how big the changes in the world are? And what can we, or should we, as taxpayers, be prepared to fund? I thought a good person to ask about this in a wider business economic structural sense would be Eric Crampton from the New Zealand Initiative, who's been looking and commentating on these issues for some time. And Eric joins us by video link now. Eric, good to see you again, mate.
Morning.
30 mil doesn't seem a lot, but is it? What is this in context? An attempt by TVNZ to stop its collapse, stave off the inevitable, or just tick a box for a minister?
I doubt that it's box ticking for a minister. They are in some financial difficulty. I would have thought that they would have been progressing towards a paywall. So TVNZ has tons of back catalog content. I was expecting, and I think some at TVNZ might have been expecting, that they would be setting a paywall on all of that. I'd be willing to pay a bit per month to be able to have access to the news on demand when I want it, some of their news magazine shows, but also their back catalog of all of the things that they've run over the past decades. This doesn't sound like that's what they're doing, though.
Okay. Can we put this in context of what else is happening, and that is the Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill, which really took an interesting turn. I think it was last week when Google just said, look, if you guys do this, we're turning off all the links to your news sites.
Yeah, that was fun. And it's a bit surprising. So that was on Friday. Now, from the Canadian example gives some context, and that's what makes Google's move a little bit surprising here. Like, I'm cheering for it, but it was a little bit surprising. So we've talked about this before. In response to Canada's legislation, Facebook pulled out of news in Canada entirely. I think it's around August 2023. They blocked all links to news. Users can't post any news that's facing Canadians, or Canadian Facebook users cannot access news on Facebook, because Facebook rightly saw Canada's system as just being too risky. Like New Zealand's, if they facilitated access to news, in New Zealand, it's the wording's a little bit different, but it sounds like it amounts to the same thing. First, you're compelled into negotiation with news media companies that want to negotiate with you over your having linked to them. And recall that since the internet started, free to link, but also paywalls have been kind of standard operating procedure. Facebook blocked. Google did something different. So in Canada, Google avoided getting into that negotiation arbitration process by throwing a pile of money at the problem. Most of the money that they threw at it, though, was money that they were already putting into journalism in Canada. So like in New Zealand, Google funds a lot of like journalist training, things like that, right? Programs for journalists and for media companies. Google took all of that money, killed those programs, stuffed it into this new pot that the government is setting up, except currently how that money is going to get distributed isn't quite set yet. So Google's only made an advance payment into it of a partial amount, saying that they're going to wait until the distribution mechanism has been set before they put the rest of the $100 million in. So news companies haven't gotten anything out of it yet. A lot of them that had been getting funded out of these Google News support mechanisms, they're going to be getting less than they used to. Depends how the new distribution mechanism turns out. But Google didn't threaten to just block news in Canada. They repurposed some of the money that they were already spending in Canada and just bought it off. So that made Friday's announcement here a bit surprising, that in response to New Zealand's link tax, Google would be stopping to serve up news here. So Google News would end, links to news would end, the Google Showcase would end, and presumably the money that Google does here give for various journalism endeavors. So that's not so hot for companies that have relied on links from Google. I know that, and it's especially not so hot for me. I Google for news all the time. I'll go on like the Post site. I will search for old columns of mine. I always do it in the search bar in Chrome, so that's a Google search. I'm always looking for old stories to remind me of, okay, how the heck did policy get to where it is? How can we think about this? If we can't Google news anymore, it's going to really suck. It's like part of my brain's going to get lopped off.
Yeah, here's an alternate scenario, though.
Sure.
You know, Facebook and Google throw their toys out of the cot. We're not carrying your stuff anymore. Suddenly people can't find it, but their desire for it, and you just said that'd be a disaster for me. Would your behaviour then change to go and seek that content out in other ways? I mean, I would try other search. Yeah, other sources. You know,
I would try other search engines, but the Canadian experience is that people were getting access to less reliable news, right? So once you're not getting reliable news links on Facebook, you're getting your uncle's ramblings instead, right? And that was one of the findings in some of the work consequent to the Canadian legislation. We'll see what happens with it here. If you're losing access to authoritative news searches through Google, well, that could be to the detriment of an informed public too, right?
Look, the other thing I would note with some sarcasm, democracy still seems to be going on without Newshub. Have you noticed that? That despite the dire predictions of how the country would decline and fall as various news organisations morphed or changed or indeed shut down, it seems we're still cracking along, the sun's still rising and the economy is still functional.
Not sure. There's some data that I wish we had, though, right? So we don't have good ongoing surveys of like civic knowledge. So do people basically know what's going on in the country and in politics, in policy, so that they can make an informed decision come the next election? We don't have ongoing surveys of that type. It's rarely done at all. We'd had one in 2020, just trying to assess the state of civic knowledge, and it's pretty poor. The New Zealand election study does it. But we don't have it on that kind of ongoing basis. And the New Zealand election study one is fairly thin. Like it focuses on other stuff. It's a great survey, but it's not trying to always assess like a marker on civic knowledge over time. Yeah. So it could yet cause harm. You're right that the sky hasn't fallen as yet, but it all contributes a little bit, right? So that if you have a less informed public, more likely that shenanigans happen in Beehive and that they don't get noticed.
Right. People just need to listen to and view the platform, which does use social media extensively. And I know that there are ramifications for us